Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next session. And the topic of the next panel discussion is harnessing geospatial data in entertainment, production, and real-time applications. To guide us through this discussion, I'm pleased to welcome our moderator, Professor Mike Fischer, Professor, University of Southern California. Big round of applause, please. And joining Professor Fischer on the panel are Mr. Peter Hawkins, General Manager, Esri, and Mr. Alex Barder, Co-Managing Partner, Beast Media Group, LLC. Welcome, gentlemen. And now, without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Professor Fischer to kick off the discussion. Over to you now.
Hey, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here as your moderator, and it's also a thrill for me, for the first time in many years, to be the person on stage with the most hair. I want to... I'm really happy.
We tried to convince Mike to shave his head. He wouldn't do it. I don't know. We
tried.
Not
not a team player.
Clearly.
So, in a world right now where there are a lot of buzzworthy, hyped, and sexy trends like metaverse, AI, and Web3, I am really happy that we have the opportunity to discuss this important topic of geospatial data in gaming. It's a little bit like the tortoise and the hare. It's slow moving. It doesn't capture the headlines as much as a metaverse or AI, but it's actually very influential in its own way. A sport called geocaching, where you hide treasures and then mark them with a GPS for other people to find, started in the year 2000. The company that made Pokemon Go, Niantic, released their first game, Ingress, in 2016. In 2012, and Pokemon Go in 2016. So this is a technology that has touched millions of people around the world, and yet doesn't necessarily get the attention it deserves, which is why we're here. So before we jump into our questions, maybe I'll ask each of you to give a brief introduction of yourself and your background in the space. Alex, I'll start with you.
Sure. I come from media and entertainment for my entire career, initially in movies and for about 20 years doing distribution, finance, production at the studio level and also at the independent level. Distributed about 120 movies, then launched immersive entertainment company about 10 years ago, focused on working with large movie studio IP, made the game based on the Paranormal Activity movie franchise, made a game based on the Mission Impossible franchise, and ever since then we're in various areas, including traditional games, direct with PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, Meta, all the bigger players, and then also we're in the branded entertainment space, now also in the nonprofit space, and finally playing in the metaverse Web3 space.
Peter?
Nice. So I'm the third best looking guy here on stage. So
I disagree.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting there. Peter Hawkins, I'm the general manager of Esri. Esri is a global technology geospatial software company. My background has been basically 25 years within the spatial space, both within software, hardware, platform, data, and also analytics. So I'm located in Singapore, and we've got a full, we've got a global presence, but I'm responsible for the full Asia Pacific market. So.
And as for myself, I think I was introduced as a professor in the games program at University of Southern California, but actually my home now is Hong Kong. In addition to my work as a consultant, prior to that I was a president and CEO of Square Enix America, the publishers of Final Fantasy. I was also head of publishing at Epic Games. You may be familiar with our small indie title, Fortnite. And I was also head of first-party game publishing at Xbox. So let's get started. Peter, I'll direct this question first to you, but Alex, the same question will go to you later. It has been 8 years since the launch of Pokemon Go. Is that still the best case example of geospatial gaming? Or what are some other examples that you might cite for people who want to learn more about this space?
So, I mean, I think Pokemon Go is probably one of the most kind of prevalent and one of the most kind of noteworthy kind of gaming applications that is kind of out there. And it's still incredibly successful, right? But I think there's a whole host of others. I mean, for those of you who use a series of different messaging apps and so on, Snapchat actually integrates location in a very subtle way. And I think that's really kind of how I mean, we talk about geospatial, but it's probably more just kind of a location capability, right? And there's many different levels of that. Like there's just basic GPS kind of capability and so on, but then it becomes a lot more, I would say, pervasive in terms of sort of the types of capabilities that you can use. Other very innovative companies that are out there, such as Waze, for instance. Now, that's obviously a very kind of navigational use case, but they've actually gamified it to many ways to actually generate, kind of user-based content and so on. So there's many, I think many other capabilities that are out there, but I still think Pokemon Go is probably arguably one of the key use cases, or at least one of the key games that everyone has seen today, for sure.
Yeah, thanks. I think the technology is really underused today. I think we should be way further along than we are right now. But you do see examples like if you go to Walt Disney World, you get the wristband and it syncs with your technology. It knows where you are, knows what you're doing, influences your theme park and gamifies your theme park experience. But I really think we need to be way further along than we are right now.
And actually, just to add to that as well, I mean, I think a lot of, we're all on social media, right? I mean, irrespective of what type of platform that you're on. But social media actually uses location in a much more sort of pervasive way as well. And it's, again, incredibly subtle. And it goes from everything in terms of the types of services and the types of content, i.e. kind of advertising and so on, that's actually, presented to you and to your respective profile, all the way down to, you can then start using things such as, air tags or, kind of friend-to-friend kind of, or peer-to-peer is what we call it, kind of location tracking and so on. So there's a lot of that is out there, and I think actually location is probably used a lot more subtly than probably a lot of people actually believe today.
Yeah, one of the interesting experiences I had was before I visited Machu Picchu as a tourist, I visited it in VR and was able to walk around and get a sense, so that when I went to Machu Picchu in person, I kind of had a sense of where to go. It was still new to me, right? But I didn't feel completely lost. An amazing experience is one called Zombie Run, where it's a storytelling application, but you actually have to get out of your house and move around in order to hear the next chapter of the story. So I'm curious, are there any other applications, either real or that you can imagine, beyond just gaming? You mentioned gaming so you mentioned Waze as something that was gaming adjacent. Just before we move on to the other topic, any other examples that you think are good for people to make a reference to?
In terms of the location space, I mean, again, I think social media is clearly one of the key areas, right? But we're certainly seeing now, I think, a big integration around the AR/VR space. So, you mentioned around, you were able to visit Machu Picchu prior to that, but we have a huge number of, let's say, kind of more simulated worlds which are coming out and about. If you look at, actually some of the Fortnite type games and so on like that, there's a new location element, actually a desire to have a stronger real world representation that sits in there. Now, there's a gaming angle to it, but then when you start actually looking, I think, at more a simulated kind of multiverse in a sense, that's when you're starting to see much more, I think, accurate and sort of detailed location content that is actually required as part of those. So certainly the AR/VR space and also simulation, I think, is now becoming much more sort of mainstream.
Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, we built a digital twin of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia recently, and what was interesting about that is that a certain constituency they wanted is able to go into the hospital, go into the actual rooms in the hospital, the lobby, some of the labs, etc., and really experience what it is to be in the hospital and track it and track their location inside the hospital and know exactly where they are in the hospital so they can navigate through. So that's a non-entertainment experience, but certainly a gamified experience. So you're seeing this in various applications.
Actually, on that, medical kind of criteria, hospital criteria is actually a significant use case, at least for us, in terms of much more sort of professional application. If you kind of look at sort of the type of equipment, like that's actually arguably one of the sort of the biggest challenges which actually large hospitals have, and that's often come to us to say, look, how can you actually build, let's say, a BIM model, but we also need to understand what our asset management situation looks like, because it's life or death between a matter of minutes, and arguably large hospital environments, this kind of critical equipment is very, very important. So that's actually a major use case for us, at least in the medical space.
On a less serious note, I met somebody just a few weeks ago. He was from Republic of Georgia, and he visited Los Angeles for the first time. But he had spent so much time playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is based on a real map of Los Angeles. He actually knew his way around some of his neighborhoods because he played the game in GTA. Now, Peter, you mentioned something in terms of reproducing the real world. I hear a lot about the term digital twin. And I think it may mean different things to different people because it's an area we're just starting to explore. Give your thoughts on what digital twins are and what their impact might be. And then, Alex, the same question to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, digital twins is basically, it's a virtual representation of reality. And that really can be anything from, kind of a natural environment through to a built environment all the way through to an indoor environment, right? So, I mean, a digital twin really kind of is effectively a digitized representation of what you see around you, but then overlaid with additional capability, additional data, and you can start doing then modeling, and you can start doing tracking and measurements and so on, kind of within the space. So there's a lot of enterprise type kind of capabilities related to digital twin, but we're also seeing, I think, a lot more sort of simulation type requirements that's coming out of digital twin as well. For us in our space, actually, we're seeing government and private industry actually pushing a large part of that. We're involved in a major pilot with the Japanese government right now around actually determining how people move around a multi-floor office space, and people actually wearing, believe it or not, kind of brain measurement caps. And it determines the level of happiness, which ultimately reflects kind of the level of productivity, depending upon what they're doing and where they are within the space. So we're starting to see digital twins really becoming not just kind of very specific or in enterprise space, but also now starting to kind of branch out into kind of very new and innovative areas as well.
Yeah, it's funny. We're actually in the middle of building out a digital twin. Taking a step back, we're building out I want to call it a Web3 platform, but it's not really crypto. But it's sort of a game world, if you will, and I can get into it later. But within that, we're building actually out a Hong Kong experience, which is a digital twin of Hong Kong Island, which is really fun. And being able to explore the island, be able to explore, sort of the key sites for various reasons, depending on the use case that we're playing. We have a specific use case, but other people can utilize it for other use cases. But it's really interesting, and being able to navigate through is something you haven't really been able to do before with any kind of real precision and everything else. What Peter does could be incredibly invaluable to be able to understand where we are and what opportunities we can take advantage of in the digital twin world, and also as it relates to the real world. So it's really interesting.
And you can probably also just see from the conversation here, you have, and it's kind of great to have these types of forums because, we obviously live and breathe sort of geospatial, right, in terms of kind of the traditional sort of enterprise, professional services, et cetera, But when you end up getting this kind of mixture of minds, actually to see how geospatial is actually then utilized by, stuff such as Alex does here is actually really, really impressive, because that's where you end up getting this kind of, the core technology plus the imagination and the innovation to a degree. And it kind of really helps kind of, I'd say, kind of build out and actually sort of really press location in a much more kind of greater capability than probably what we would have initially thought of within industry.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, in all honesty, for the first time in history, I don't care what kind of business you have, who you are, we as business people, as brands, as IP owners, whatever, have a two-way dialogue with our consumer. And we do that in a few ways. One is data. We now have data on everybody in this room. We know what you bought this morning, what you had for breakfast yesterday morning. We know everything about you. Now, if you marry that data with geospatial data, now we can connect you with the businesses and brands that you are already in business with. And now you can do that in a way that you might want that. You want to be able to be connected to McDonald's or wherever it is that you go shopping or whatever. So it's amazing what we can do now. And the power of the merging and the convergence of the technology is revolutionary. And it's going to transform how every one of us lives our lives forever.
May I just add, sorry, may I just add, and I love this.
You want to talk too, Mike? I'm sorry.
What I love about this as well is, I mean, ultimately, there's been a lot of detail, I think a lot of kind of industry and a lot of very high-profile cases around, what does location mean about privacy and so on and so on. And rightly so, we need to maintain and ensure that there is a certain degree of kind of protection there. But at the same point, the more that actually people opt in to enable and allowing their location data to be utilized, actually it provides much more personal solutions or services that's very specific to them.
It's contextually relevant to them. They care about it. It's important that they are able to relate. That's the whole ballgame, right? All of us don't mind being advertised to if it's something we care about. But I don't need a Sephora ad. I don't need a women's shoe store in my life. I don't care. But if somebody's talking about Tesla or Major League Baseball or whatever, then I'm going to care, and it's relevant to me.
Yeah, I don't want to see a hairdressing advert, right?
Clearly, I don't need to see a barber.
I think we're good.
Peter, we're all
You
good
do,
avoiding that.
Well, my favorite example of using the data in a practical way, you talked about hospitals, but is an analog example. There was a Danish architect, Rim Koolhaus, who was tasked with creating a new college campus. And he built all of the buildings and all of the facilities and no sidewalks, no pathways. He built grass.
Yeah.
And then he waited 1 year and he saw where people walked in the grass based on where the paths were worn. And then he built the sidewalks after that. And he built large, medium, or small-sized sidewalks based on where people walk. So he did it all before digital data was available.
Which, by the way, when you think about it, is amazing. Because when you really, if we can reverse if it's not from the brand or the business to the consumer, let's say it's the reverse, where the habits of the consumer now impact how the business functions around the consumer, and the businesses or brands will change their ecosystem to fit around the consumer's lives. So if we all have phones in our pockets and we come up to a digital sign or something like that, all of a sudden the sign knows that it's us, it's Alex, it's Mike, it's Peter walking up to that sign. It's going to be 3 different ads that are going to be served to us. It's going to be 3 different pieces of content that are going to be served to us. It's never been done before. It's completely different.
And actually, to some degree, at least in the media space, if you, let's say, kind of watch, English Premier League, for instance, and you watch the same game, Liverpool, Manchester United in the UK or Germany or Singapore or Australia, ironically, the actual signage, the advertising boards are different depending upon which market you're actually watching it. Now, that's a relatively straightforward use case per se, and some would say a very obvious use case, but there you're already starting to see, again, more prevalent location that's being utilized to sort of, better present services to the actual consumer.
Yeah, one thing we're playing with, and Mike, I'm sure you've done this as well, is in the game space. So you're making a game, you're playing a game. Let's say it's a game mobile and you're out in the world. And wherever you are in the world, depending on where you are and what you're doing, the narrative of the actual gameplay may dynamically change based on, 1, who you are, and 2, what you're doing or where you are. If you're at a beach town, if you're in the mountains, if you're near a certain store, all of a sudden the various elements in the game may change to enhance gameplay dynamically in real time, and that game experience is different for every one of us. And AI certainly contributes to that, but really it's driven by geospatial, understanding your data, where you are, and who you are.
And also, I've seen some games now taking into account real-time weather as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about blockchain and Web3, because clearly there's a lot of passion for this in Hong Kong. Neither Peter and I are experts in this, so Alex, I'm going to defer to you to this.
Great.
How do we think about the opportunities with spatial data incorporating blockchain or Web3 technology?
Well, so I can't really speak to a lot of the other platforms that are out there. They're focused on crypto. That's not a focus for us. Our focus is really about consumer experience. So when we say blockchain or we talked about Web3, we're talking about more of a gamified world. So for us, it's really about where you are in the world will influence, and this is what we're doing, or part of what we're doing. It's actually one small part of what we're doing, but it's really important, is the world around you is going to be built based on where you live, right? So if I live in Hong Kong, all of a sudden the Hong Kong experience is going to pop up around you. If I live in LA, that might be an LA experience, and that LA experience may be contextually relevant to you. And that to us is really important, because we can walk around a preset town, we can buy land and all that other, we can buy tokens and hope they go up and then maybe sell them or buy NFTs or whatever. That's all great. But for us, where's the utility in that? For us, it's all about utility. How do we make people's lives better? How do we improve our day-to-day existence. And we do that using geospatial, understanding what's contextually relevant. It's just, for us, it's just another data point for who you are as a person, where you live, where you specifically live is really important. If just to use this as an example, here in Hong Kong, every time I'm here, I stay in Wong Chuk Hong. Wong Chuk Hong, Hang, am I mispronouncing it? I'm sorry if I am. But I drive by, I never take the subway. In the Ubers, I always drive by the Hong Kong Jockey Club. So why is it when I drive by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, they know that I'm there? They'll know that I'm driving by because they see my phone as I drive by every morning and night. Why is it in my world there isn't a Hong Kong Jockey Club digital twin that pops up that enables me to engage with them, and it enables me to engage and participate? Maybe there's a coupon, maybe there's an invite, maybe there's a special event or something that gets me to engage. I'm not opposed to it. It's relevant to me, obviously, because it knows where I am, and I drive by there twice a day at least. So the digital world, the spatial world that we all spend a big chunk of our lives in, can be heavily influenced by the physical world and where we are every single day of our lives. And then that's how we connect the two. That's where it becomes seamless. And that's the goal, isn't it? To have a seamless, integrated digital and real life where we can offset the things that we have to do and really focus on the things that we want to do. And that's the goal for us. That's how we see it.
May I just add actually to that, it's a great point. I mean, we see a lot of that already now within malls, for instance, right? You know, like malls are trying to obviously kind of utilize kind of, you know, footfall traffic and trying to actually sort of better kind of increase spend that's actually relevant to people. And so you actually start walking around, you know, a building information model. It's kind of how we, you know, sort of depict it within our space. But then you can actually start to have very, very relevant, specific kind of adverts that's sent to a particular person. Now, that's one area, right? But then, you know, to your point as well, you can actually, in the grander scheme, you can actually be going past a particular area that's relevant to you. If you're a football fan, rugby fan, whatever it may be, art fan, and then all of a sudden, you know, you can actually start to see that on the bigger scale. That then actually starts to become a lot more relevant. So I think that's kind of where we're starting to see that type of area. And the last thing, I mean, I'm actually very excited about what actually Apple is doing in this space as well. And we're starting to now see, you know, the lens and the glass, you know, so all of a sudden now we're starting to see a much bigger, I think, AR application that's actually happening out there. I mean, Google tried it, you know, I think 5 or 10 years ago, and I actually thought it was a pretty cool product, but, you know, clearly they didn't. So, but I think that's actually probably 10 or so, 15 years ahead of its time in a sense, and that's clearly where we're starting to see the industry going. You know, people want to see, you know, we're no longer just going to be stuck in front of screens to kind of, you know, entertain ourselves and kind of, you know, gain our exercise and so on and so on. It's going to be in a much more, I think, kind of realistic, real world, but digitized environment.
Fantastic, thank you. So in the few minutes we have left, a quick crystal ball prediction of the future. I'll kick it off. My prediction is a little bit more of a request, especially if there's someone from the Hong Kong government here. When I order an Uber, I can see exactly where that car is and where it's on its way to me. I want that for the Hong Kong buses, please. It's not hard to do. The technology is here right now. Please give me geospatial data so I know how long I'm waiting for my bus. So that's for me. Peter, I'll start with you. What's your crystal ball say about the future of geospatial data?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think Alex mentioned it earlier on. We are literally like only scraping the surface of how geospatial is actually utilized today. I actually see a future where the technology already exists. It's actually us as a society that needs to be a lot more, I think, accepting of, you know, maybe giving up some of, not so the freedoms per se, but being accepting of actually passing across our data to, you know, organizations. And I see a world where, again, it's this kind of it's an augmented reality space, right? I mean, that's clearly where it's going to be. Like, your interactions are not necessarily just going to be in the physical, right? But it's also going to be people who are on the other side of the world, but are also able to be here situationally within our environment.
Yeah, to add to, I agree with Peter completely, but just to add to one part of it and expand on it, I think we're at a point now where privacy is something we think about, talk about, and everything else, but we already have given up privacy in some way, shape, or form. We've accepted it, we've moved on from it, and oftentimes it's something we're willing to give up if we get value in exchange for it. So my crystal ball, for whatever it is a time where businesses, brands, whoever, will know the details, the data of their constituencies, of their fandoms, and be able to transform the relationship that they have with their customers for the benefit of their customers. So it makes our lives better. If the business or brand or whoever or the government, whoever knows me, knows what I want, then they can build a world around me in the real world and in the digital world that I care about, that I enjoy, that I want to be in. I don't have to filter through all the noise that we all spend our time having to filter through. We want to live in a world where it's relevant to us, the things we care about, and so we're free to spend the time with our friends and family and otherwise. So I think it's a world where we all come to terms with the safe use and the correct use of our private information, where it's not going to be compromised or it's not going to be used against us, and that has to be properly regulated and everything else. But once we have that safety in place, a world where we all can live the lives that we want and have the world around us the way we want.
Fantastic. Well, the lights are flashing. I don't know if we're supposed to cut the blue wire or the red wire before the bomb explodes. So I'll let you go. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. A big
Thank
round
you.
of applause for Alex,
Thank you.
Peter, and Mike. Thank you so much, gentlemen.